John Levitt is a runner from Boston, Massachusetts. He's the sales manager and endurance team manager at InsideTracker, a Cambridge, Massachusetts based health tech company that provides personalized guidance on nutrition and performance based on your blood, DNA, and soon wearable device data, while also taking into account your habits and goals. Jonathan graduated from UMass Amherst Isenberg School of Business with a double major in sports management and marketing, and co-founded and ran an intramural-based league while at UMass. I'll have to ask him about that later. He started running in 2013 after the Boston Marathon bombing, and since then has run 6 marathons, a 50K, and a 40-mile day in the Grand Canyon, rim to rim to rim. Maybe you guys have heard about that one. When he's not running or helping others with their performance, he has his own podcast called For the Long Run, which is an exploration of what keeps elite runners running long, strong, and motivated. So, welcome to the TrainRight podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so we're talking. I mean, I know there's a time difference. I'm in France at the moment, and you're in Boston.
Yes.
Yeah, how is it actually? Well, now that it's kind of the Boston Marathon has been postponed, delayed. Is
hmm
it are people upset? Is it
I
affecting
think
the run community there?
I think it's been sort of an up and a down. There was so much uncertainty before it was postponed, and people were about to get into their peak training. So I think the timing of the announcement was good. I mean, what's today? The 24th, 25th. So like this would have been
25th.
the peak week.
Yeah.
I think, and so it's good that people didn't have the big ramp up. Um, and then find out. And so I think that I have a lot of friends that are running this year, living here in
Hmm.
Boston, and I think a lot of people are just excited to like back off and train and put in a lot of miles between between now and then. So I don't know. I think we'll see some really fit people come whatever made up holiday it is on that Monday that the city of Boston decides the second Monday of September is now a holiday.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and I've visited Boston only one time actually. I'm not much of a city person, but I really really loved it there. You've got an incredible run community. I mean, not only I know you run, road marathons and also trails. You like there's still I forget the name of the trail system that's right there in Boston outside the city.
So the Middlesex Fells are like a couple
Yes.
miles north of Boston, and it's a good trail system. I did my training for my first 50K there. It got a little
Nice.
repetitive because it's like a 6.5 mile loop at most.
Mhm.
So I spent 4 hours there one day and ran a whole a whole bunch of those loops. Um, and it's relatively flat as well. So
Yeah.
it's you're running around a reservoir basically, with
Yeah.
some punchy hills. But it's 20 minutes from where I live, and it's not the road, so it does the job.
Yeah, I remember running there actually. It was with I was with the November Project. It's like a
hmm
like an outdoor workout group, and man, like some of those trails that they love the fells because you can like you can actually like there are some really punchy hills and it can be pretty technical and you're like
Yeah.
right in a big city. It's like it's like one of my favorite things. So I've done a short intro for you for the listeners. So they kind of have a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be talking about. But um, so you work for InsideTracker, and I was wondering if you could do kind of like a short introduction of what is InsideTracker and what is it exactly you do.
So InsideTracker is a platform that provides personalized guidance on nutrition, supplementation, and performance. And so it was born out of the idea that personalizing your intake can improve longevity, improve performance, improve sleep, improve energy, just based on getting your body what it needs. So, company's been around for 10 years. The first 8 years were focused on using blood data to drive this guidance. Now we've incorporated genetic information, so we're looking at genetic traits that are linked to
Hmm.
health and performance. And then in the coming weeks, we'll actually be adding wearable device data. So we're looking at sleep and resting heart rate and activity. So we get this full picture of who you are as an individual and
Hmm.
and the impact that the decisions you make on a daily basis are having from the inside out. And it's good to just, collect all this data, but it's another thing to actually tell you what to do and prescribe action based on, these dozens of variables that are so different for each person. So essentially the output is, do this, eat this food X number of times a week, take the supplement in this specific dosage, modify training in this way. You're doing too much, you're not doing enough, do yoga, do strength training,
Hmm.
things like that. Um, with the idea of helping people cut through the clutter of all the noise out there, when it comes to diet and supplementation guidance that we can find on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, so it's kind of controversial about always talking to someone about nutrition, because it's almost like, dare I say, religion. It's like people get pretty worked up about it.
Yeah,
And it can be very polarizing, what people's beliefs are. And so I'm always been like a very scientific person, and I appreciate the scientific approach that Inside Tracker takes to kind of like take the hard data and then, make recommendations from there. And from my limited experience, but also just like my understanding of it, is that it's not just like, you give several options of, okay, what works for you in your, if you need more iron, you can eat A through B, A through D or something like this. And like, it gives you options to kind of optimize your nutrition, but not just like a set, like you must just only eat this all the time.
totally. Yeah, we don't follow any prescriptive diet, so we're not going to tell you to go vegan or paleo or cut out this or cut out that. But it's more
Hmm.
about the specific things that will help. So let's say
Hmm.
you're an athlete with low iron and high cholesterol. We would know how many times a week you're eating meat, so we might not recommend that you eat more red meat. We might say, you should have shellfish,
Hmm.
or you should take an iron supplement. Whereas some athletes may get a recommendation to eat less meat, and so it's totally individualized, based on
Hmm.
the food preferences and what works for you versus, oh, you should be paleo, or this
Hmm.
and that.
And so, if athletes that have certain dietary restrictions, you can still accommodate that
For
through
sure.
Inside Tracker as well.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important, because if someone has it for certain ethical beliefs, like they follow a certain practice, yeah, you want to be able to follow that the best you can. Like I think my father is actually a food science human nutritionist, not like a dietary nutritionist, but a research scientist, and so
Mhm.
we've always had these discussions, and he he kept on driving the point home to me. He's like, Hillary, the one thing that all scientists like know and believe and agree on is that there's no one size fits all, especially for human
Yes.
beings. And I'm like, okay, yeah, Dad, that makes sense. Um,
Our
but
answer
I
all the
was,
time our answer all the time is it depends. Like you can't ask a question and have a if you get a straight answer, um, keep asking questions because it's probably not personalized enough.
oh my gosh, that's hilarious, because like as a person who loves like right and wrong and like this
Right.
is the answer, this is not, the it depends infuriates me, but it's also the most, it's like it's the most accurate. So
Right.
but I'm curious, how where did this idea of Inside Tracker come from? And were you involved at the precipice of the company, or did you kind of get involved later?
So our founder had a death in the family when he was very young, and so I think he was 9 at the time. And little 9-year-old Gil said, "I want to live forever." So he devoted his life to anti-aging and aging-related research, and he was studying in some of the top anti-aging labs in the world, actually. And he got to this pivot point, and he said, hey, I can continue, um, I can continue my research in a lab, and I can publish some papers that a couple dozen scientists will see, and that's great. If that's your choice, that's
Mm.
that's necessary as well.
Yeah.
And then he was like, or I can start a company and impact millions and millions and potentially billions of people, and change their lives. And
Hmm.
I'm glad that he picked option number two. Um,
Hmm.
and that was 10 years ago. And so I joined 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago now. And when I joined, I asked him, I said, "What's the goal of this company? What's your mission?" And he said, "I want to help every human on this planet improve their life through this
Hmm.
personalized approach." And I said, "Okay." And this was 2014. I said, "Okay, that's a great goal. Kind of lofty, but I can dig it. Talk about big scary goals." And as time has gone on, it's actually becoming like not that outlandish to say that we could one day have the potential to impact every person on the planet. Um, and
Hmm.
it's maybe not in the way that he dreamed up initially, but you look at improving the food chain or um, different pieces of the puzzle where you're making buying decisions when it comes to food, and let's say you're making a better
Hmm.
decision because of some of our research. Whether you're a customer or not, we could help you have an impact on either eating better quality food or eating food that's more likely to have an impact for you, or you go through the testing and find out this is exactly what I need and this is how I need to improve. So um, long answer to the first part of the question. The second part of the question of how did I get my hands involved?
Hmm.
I was at an event that they were sponsoring called Executive Athletes, and as the name indicates, it was intended for executive athletes, so or athletes that were executives. So I was the youngest person in the room by maybe 15 years. My dad invited me to this event, and
Hmm.
so after InsideTracker did their presentation, I went up to say thanks. That was great. And the CEO and founder, who's the chief science officer, started like peppering me with questions about like what was I doing here and what was I doing for work and this and that. And we kept going and going and going. And I was like, why do they care so much? Like I'm the least I thought I was like, I'm the least interesting person in the room. Everybody else is far along in their career and whatnot. And I guess it pays to be different. And so I was telling them what I was doing for work, and the CEO was like, "Cool, why don't we hire you?" Um, I was like, "Oh, well, I like my job, but I'm open to a conversation." And 2 weeks later, I had signed with InsideTracker, which was awesome. We were very small at the time, probably 8 or 9 employees, and we're at about 75 now, which is wild to see the growth. And so as time has gone on, my
Hmm.
my role has evolved from doing everything on the business side,
Hmm.
including customer service and sales and marketing and blogs and Twitter and social media, to focusing very heavily on working with new customers and working within the endurance community. So my two official titles are sales manager and endurance team manager. So I have the pleasure of working with, we have about a dozen um, athletes that we consider a part of the Inside Tracker team,
Hmm.
and um, and I get to hang out with them and you know speak with them regularly, and see them when I travel and all that good stuff. So it's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
And so, I mean, I know you mentioned like the initial lofty goals of the founder was, to touch the lives of pretty much everyone, not just athletes. And
Right.
maybe it's just because of my focus in the ultra running community, but it seems like that's, your involvement in the, at least specifically in the ultra endurance world, like a lot of athletes that I see, at least in the US, are teamed up with you guys. And is that so? Are you primarily focused on athletes, or like the ultra running world, endurance world in general, or?
So it's been an interesting few years, because when I joined, I said, okay, it's a great mission to try and conquer the world, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and you
Yeah.
can't go get everyone right away and help everyone right away. So I
Hmm.
so I said, as a runner, I know what it's like to bonk. I know what it's like to be injured, and I know that and I know what it's like to want to get better. And
Mhm.
so, if you think about it, if you have a data-driven approach to improving your health, it's very similar to a data-driven approach to improving endurance performance. So you run, you do workouts, you assess uh, data and metrics, you make changes, and you improve. So what I said was, runners need this, runners want this, and runners will pay for this. So as a very young company, we needed the people that needed us, um,
Yeah.
and and I said from the beginning, runners need us, and runners will use us. And so that was all I knew, the endurance community. And so I had,
Mhm.
plenty of contacts in the endurance community, as well as the professional athletics world. And so that's sort of where I turned first when I was tasked with growing this thing. And
Yeah.
so as time went on, I got connected to a handful of pro athletes, and it worked for them. And they continued spreading the word within primarily the trail and ultra world, because it was something that was working. And I think that the trail and ultra world is really unique in that, if you have something that's helpful, you're going to tell your friends. I'm
Mhm.
sure there are triathletes that are listening to this podcast, and I think that the dynamic of a triathlete versus a runner versus a team sport athlete, I think they're very different people.
Yeah.
We haven't had a ton of success in triathlon, but we've had tons of success in trail and ultra and road marathoning and road racing as well.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like it's it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like if you have something that works and you have people that like to talk and share what's working for them, it's a no-brainer that it's going to spread. And um, the goal is to help with health, but people are
Mhm.
using it for performance. And by the way, you're improving your health at the same time. So it's like
Yeah.
you're doing these things that help facilitate someone's career or their hobby or whatever. And if it works for them, it'd be silly to keep it to yourself.
I know, I love that. You're right. Ultra runners like to talk. Yes, we do. But I think it's also just in the community, like it like great, like if it's positive results, it kind of spreads like a wildfire. And
Right.
I also think just with endurance, it's like, in these long races, like nutrition can make or break your race.
For sure.
Whereas like in shorter distances, obviously it's like maybe it's not the nutrition of your actual race, like a 2 hour marathon. You can get by without, even ingesting a gel if it's based more on fitness and it's based more on
Right.
kind of like your day-to-day nutrition versus ultra running and like more endurance sports, triathlons, even those triathlons, like how about you give this a try? But it's more so it is your day-to-day nutrition, but it's also what you're ingesting on race day. And so I'll come back to this. I wanted to ask you, like, kind of walk me through uh these kind of startup and these like test kits that you have for InsideTracker. But
Hmm.
before that, I wanted to talk to you about, because I am such a science nerd, and I loved you have, like you said, 75 people, and a lot of those are researchers. And I'm wondering if you could tell me about any kind of all the data that you receive from people. Do they sign a consent? Like, are you using this in active ongoing studies? And if not, can you just give me a little like a summary of any kind of research studies that you are
Yeah.
working on at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the company makes all decisions based on data.
Hmm.
Everything. So when you sign up, you fill out a whole bunch of questions, and everything that is asked is used somewhere in the platform. And so what we're doing is we're collecting all of this information about people. So we know their demographics, we know their food preferences, and then we know their blood work. And now we're starting to know their genetic information and potentially sleep information. And yes, you sign a research consent. You can opt into this, with both the blood and the genetic information. So it's not the default, for
Hmm.
the genetic information. and so what we're doing is we're looking at the data in an anonymized and de-identified manner, so we can look at, what do female Asians that are 40 to 49 look like, or what do white males that are 20 to 29 look like, um, or what's the impact of eating oatmeal daily on men, or
Hmm.
what are the best interventions across the board, or what works, or so all these different little inquiries or queries that we have that we're curious about, or like, how do elite runners compare to amateur runners from the
Hmm.
inside out? So looking at training volume compared, 10 plus hours a week and less than 10 hours a week for runners, or triathletes that are training 15 hours a week, or triathletes that are training less than 15 hours a week. What are the
Hmm.
differences there? We published a paper in Nature in 2017 that looked at the impact of algorithm based personalized nutrition guidance. Basically, answering the question, does it work? And
Hmm.
so we feel that we have the largest database of healthy people that exists in the world. So we wanted to do some digging in that. And so we published this
Hmm.
paper that basically looked at, did it work? Answer is yes. And more importantly, what actually happened, and what are correlations that can be assumed based on some of these relationships. So we it's way over my head, but we published this table that looks at correlations between certain biomarkers. So from a statistical significance, as say ALT, a liver enzyme, goes up, what's
Hmm.
what's expected to go down? What's interesting with this is nobody has this data, and nobody has such a thorough and complete blood panel on. I mean, we process millions of data points, tens of millions of data points on a yearly basis, and so nobody has that. Re, you know, we base initially we based our data set on a database called NHANES, which is it's a database of about a quarter million people. It's not as they didn't all go through a thorough blood panel, but they did some testing, looking at that, and so we match the data that already exists with how it's working within our own platform, and then using data science to actually create new science, to give better recommendations. And so yeah, so you mentioned we're at 75 now. We have a data science team, and their their whole job is to look at this and either do modeling, or I couldn't begin to tell you what what they do on a daily basis, so I'm not even going to try and pretend. But one of the initiatives we did recently was with the Olympic trials. And
Hmm.
so we had about 30 athletes who were competing in the Olympic trials do a blood and DNA test.
Hmm.
And the idea there is to look at the best long distance athletes, the best marathoners in the country, and
Hmm.
what's the makeup of America's best. Um,
Hmm.
is there anything we can learn from that? I don't know. Maybe the answer is no, um,
Yeah.
but that's the job of the researcher to figure out. Um, we've done some other projects uh, with um, with other partners looking at the data. So we work with Goo Energy Labs, and their
Hmm.
team has been using InsideTracker for 4 years now, and they actually created new products because of what they were learning from having their athletes go through the program. So they came out with a
Hmm.
couple of supplements based on um, nutrient deficiencies, so
Hmm.
magnesium, vitamin D, and probiotics. All were created because those were some of the most common deficiencies or supplement needs um, that their pro athletes were having. And
Hmm.
then we looked within our data and looked at some of the most common supplement recommendations, and I mean, it's not a surprise that more people need vitamin D and
Yeah.
magnesium and probiotics. And so it's really cool to see innovation happen and product development happen using using the science that we're a part of.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so funny because it's like I think, okay, well, we're alive. Like, I ate something today. Like I will eat again. Like I've ate things like my whole life. I'm 31. Like I'm surviving, but like, sometimes it's interesting to think about it when you're like, well, we're doing just fine. Like, how can you optimize? How can you optimize your nutrition? To live longer, live better, all of these things, and um, I think the difference is, and the really cool thing about a company like InsideTracker is that, well, we haven't really, it's actually really hard to gather data on human beings, because we're all basically, I mean, I'm a scientist. So like I've read a bunch of the blogs in InsideTracker, and I encourage the listeners to go check it out, especially if you're confused on, okay, well, how in the world can my DNA like tell me anything about my diet? Well, there's several blogs on the website that can, tell you about that. But um no, but it's basically, I'm constantly in awe of like the lack of scientific data on the human population, because we're all ends of ones, we're all unique, and so you need to kind of have this broader scope, um, and get a whole bunch of data from a whole bunch of different people, um, to kind of draw these correlations or conclusions,
Well, yeah,
and so
that's the whole
yeah,
point. It's
yeah,
that's exactly what we seek to do, right?
yeah.
Our whole platform is based on human studies and looking at a
Hmm.
specific intervention and seeing if it had a statistical significance. So, okay, we're going
Yeah.
to tell you to eat oatmeal daily because that will help your glucose and your cholesterol and et cetera, et cetera. And you don't eat oatmeal and you might need more carbs. So you do that. Maybe it'll work. It probably will work. But the only way to know is if you do these N of one experiments. And so
Yep.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like we have all this information, but we're all
Hmm.
so unique. And so
Yeah.
my favorite example is Keely Henninger.
Yeah.
So we started working with Keely, I think in 2015. She just like found the website and bought as a regular customer. Um, and it was fascinating. We kept so she had low iron, and there are plenty of blogs on this. So like we can talk about her blood work because she's talked about it openly. So HIPAA disclaimer. So she kept getting a recommendation of eat more meat, and she was vegetarian, and so she kept playing around with iron supplementation, and it wasn't working, and
Mhm.
it wasn't working, and she tested 3 or 4 times, and you would expect if you take a supplement for 6 months or 8 months, it'll work eventually. Well, it wasn't. Um, and she ate a burger and ate some meat, and her iron jumped up for the first time. I don't know, in a long time, and
Mhm.
she she wrote a blog and she's like, I ate a burger and I won some races. And it's just like it's just so simple. It's my favorite because it highlights how personalized it is, where supplementation is the magic bullet for some people, and for others you need to eat meat. And
Mhm.
it's just it's so different. And had she continued just taking a supplement, she'd be wasting money. She potentially would be, getting into iron toxicity and overload if she kept trying to take more and more and more. Um,
Mhm.
but instead, she was able to tinker with these variables and get an objective answer. Is it working? No. Okay, I should do something different and play with another variable. Um, and so, yeah, I think that that's a exactly what you said. It's all about N of one and
Yep.
figuring out who you are and what works for you.
And the more N of ones that you have, the more you can kind of like compare and be like, okay, if this
Sure.
worked for someone who's similar in these in these aspects but different here, you can kind of like you can pull data from other places. And that's something I love. And I'm just even if you don't, even if listeners don't believe in this stuff and they think they have the perfect diet, that's okay. Like just join InsideTracker and start contributing to science. Like that's what I think is it's like a call to action, guys. Like, come
I
on.
love that.
Like
Do it
even
for
if you already
science.
please, like even if you already think you're perfect, like cool. You're gonna help us all out with your perfect data, please.
I love it.
um, but I also think that everyone has something to learn. And so I had another question about specifically women. So I think it's actually a common problem that women have. And I mean, I actually know another friend who was able to kind of figure out um, her low iron, with supplementation and all that kind of stuff without, because she was also maybe a vegetarian. But do you have, because I know that there's a lot of actually data lacking specifically for, physiology studies for
Yeah.
women. Do you have specific studies going on or certain, data, like, I don't know, data, like not data mines, but data reserves for
Yeah,
women?
so a couple of years ago we had a team of like 3 or 4 researchers spend like 6 months trying to determine if we could be useful
Hmm.
in this quest, I guess you could say. And
Yeah.
the problem is that there is not enough research, and
Yeah.
it's most studies are done on healthy men and healthy white men
Yep.
and young healthy white men,
Hmm.
because they're the easiest to incentivize. They're in college and stuff like that. The issue with or the difficulty with all these studies on women is the timing, and you need like very very specific timing of the testing. So we spent
Hmm.
um, like 2 person years researching this, and we were not comfortable putting out a product that we could stand behind. And so instead of putting out something that might be useful and might also be wrong, we chose not to do it, despite it being something that is very necessary. Um, and
Yeah.
so we stick to biomarkers that don't fluctuate throughout the month for women, um, and
Hmm.
give guidance related to female hormones. So DHEAS is a hormone that we do monitor in women. It's
Hmm.
related to uh, improving it can be related to fertility or energy and recovery. It's often low in the presence of amenorrhea or
Hmm.
um, underfueling, and it's not that's not always the reason, but it can be. Um, so we sort of dabble in that area, but we don't feel that we're able to um, do it the right way, so we choose not to do it. And
Hmm.
it's a problem, because it's definitely an underserved um, and necessary goal, to understand
Yeah.
these variables. Um,
Yeah.
but it's hard to do without these studies that um, haven't been done.
Yeah. So again, let's participate in science. Maybe we can like gather all the female ultra
Yeah,
runners and like,
yeah.
that do this and then come up with
S-
a cool
So
little study.
we've participated in some research studies, and I'm hoping that this can and will lead to more. So we've been a part of Western States
Hmm.
research panel for a couple years now, facilitating the blood draw component, looking at a couple of biomarkers linked to bone density, injury prevalence, and genetic markers. So it's led by an amazing group of researchers out of Stanford, um, pioneered by Tracy Hoag, Emily Krause, and Megan Roche. And
Hmm.
Megan consults for or works for a genetics company called AxGen. And so they provided the genetic testing, we provided the blood testing, and then there was bone density testing. So we had, I think, 51 athletes test the day before Western States, um, and the results are just starting to be published there. So it's looking at the difference between men and women. It's looking at injury potential, and finishing times, and
Hmm.
it was fascinating. So um, I'm hoping that we can help facilitate studies like that. We have so Emily in particular has a ton of ideas with how she as a physician and researcher can, push things forward. And then I have a friend here in Boston who is a um, nutrition science professor and long distance cyclist and spin instructor, um, Dr. Rachel Pojednik here in Boston, who also is fascinated by using this type of data for research and creating science instead of just using science. And she's pretty interested in women in particular, but also one of her passion projects is CBD and
Hmm.
creating studies looking at CBD and the effectiveness from an objective standpoint, because it's, everywhere these days. So between all of that, we have some studies or potential studies either ongoing. We hope to be a part of it this year with Western States. It's currently on. We'll see about
Yeah,
that.
we'll see.
Yeah. If not, next year for sure.
Mhm.
And that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's cool to be able to facilitate this and have our data science team um, and our science team involved in sort of curating the new research that could be possible.
Yeah. Oh man, this makes me so excited. Um, I'm like jotting
Do
down
it
all
for
these
science.
ideas. Exactly. Let's do it for science. So that is basically the overall summary of this episode. Let's all do this for science. But the last thing I want to ask you is, if someone is listens and they're interested in this, like, what are the next steps um, for them to get involved? You can visit your website, the website for Insight. It's just InsideTracker.com.
Yep.
And yeah, then what are the next steps that someone can do to kind of to start the ball rolling?
So the next steps, great question. So
Mhm.
in normal circumstances, we use Quest Diagnostics for the blood testing. So you order from our site, you tell us some information about you, and then we send you a lab slip. You print that out and bring it to Quest. We also have home testing options available. You can either have a phlebotomist come right to you, or we actually have something called a home kit where you prick your finger and send it back to us in the mail. That's available as well. And then if
Huh.
you have existing blood data, you can use our DIY plan to get analytics on data that you may have done a test through your doctor. You can upload that, not do a new blood draw, and get the same analysis as if you had done it through us on the values that had been tested already. We can't extrapolate, your testosterone levels from a test that was just done with lipids and glucose, for example.
Hmm.
So you can do it in a lab, you can do it in the comfort of your own home, and then everything is delivered through the website. And then the DNA kit is available online. We mail you a kit, you swab your cheek, you send it back to us, and then you get a report looking at that.
That's awesome. I really like all that. I'm just thinking. I'm like, I'm here in Europe. What can I do? Just kidding. I'm gonna I'm gonna be back in the States soon, so hopefully that'll be good. But yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, I can't wait to get involved in Inside Tracker and maybe just learn more about my nutrition as a whole, but also, like I said, contribute to science on the greater level. So
For sure. Cool. Hillary,
yeah,
thanks so much for having me on today. This was fun.
yeah, this is great. Thanks so much for calling me in the morning from Boston, and I hope you have a good day.
You too.